So I didn't read anything for like the first 2 weeks of November. Then I suddenly finished up the month by reading 6 books. No wonder I didn't write more than 10,000 words for NaNoWriMo. What is up, you guys? It's me, your girl, booKCase. How you doing? Are you all properly fattened after Thanksgiving? You know what? I probably told this story before, but I feel like I haven't. But Thanksgiving and Harry Potter. So I read the Harry Potter series multiple times. And one thing I never got, and it sounds stupid and embarrassing when I'm saying it now, but we real on this channel. Reading Harry Potter, they had Halloween and then they went right to Christmas. And while reading it, I was like, why don't they celebrate Thanksgiving in this world? Aren't they grateful for anything? So this went on for years and years and years until I finally, my synapses finally flickered on, connected the thoughts together, and I was like, they're in Britain, not America. I ain't the smartest of readers, but I'm not an idiot either. I mean, I solved the thriller twist of Lock Every Door by Riley Sager before even picking up the book. I knew who the little snot-nosed Fink was in the second Assassin's Apprentice book. I'm smart, just sometimes I forget stuff. But anyways, November, not that great a reading month. Again. Usually, I have one fantastic reading month followed by 3 months of blah. I've had 2 DNFs. 1 2-star, I think. Did I DNF it at the very last page, probably? I can't remember the ending. I have 2 very meh 3 stars. But then, I did top off this month with 1 5 stars. This one right here. Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Title has nothing to do with what actually happens with the book, but aside from that, 5 freaking stars. You should read this. You should read Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. You should read Final Girls by Riley Sager. I haven't read that yet. It's probably good. It's on my shelf, so I need to get to it. Quick question, do you guys like it when I'm sitting like this? I like it like this because I like the camera angle better, but how do you feel? But I'm telling you how you should feel right now about this book. It's very, very good. I've already filmed an individual wrap-up for it like I do with all the thrillers I like. I'm just gonna say very quickly now because I just like rave and explain and just fangirl over that book in that review. So, characters. Not too many, not too few. Good. Thrillers tend to either have too many or too few. Too few, we can pick up really quick who's the culprit. Too many, we don't get... Where did this pen come from? Too many, and we're just really spread out among them. Our relationship with the characters gets weaker and thinner. So when someone's viewed to be a villain, it's either not like built up properly or we don't care because we don't know the person. So this one did good. Home Before Dark. I feel like I'm like over explaining this because I've talked about this like 2 times already now. But it is the story of Maggie, who is infamous, and she really doesn't want to be infamous. When she was 5 years old, her family lived in this really old infamous house too called Baneberry Hall. Baneberry Hall has an awful past. Lots of murders happened in it, but Maggie's mom and dad at the time needed a cheap house, and it was a beautiful, like, gothic manor. So they bought it, and it was haunted. They lasted like 20 days, I think, in the house, until they, like, ran out of there, ran to a hotel, they called the police, and they're like, we are never going over there, you need to check and see what's going on over there, but I'm telling you right now, this happened, look at my daughter, she's all injured, and Maggie to this day has a scar on her cheek from what happened that night at that house. And so from that police report, it somehow gets out to the newspapers, the larger media, and then the dad eventually writes a book called House of Horrors detailing what went on in Baneberry Manor. And Maggie has been living in the shadow of that book since young childhood. People treat her as an outcast or a novelty, and she hates it. She hates that her parents never talk about what really happened. Her mom is like, yeah, the whole book was a lie, so she feels conflicted about her relationship with her dad, who she now sees as a liar. But he's insisting that everything was the truth. But then he dies, so there's no more opportunities to talk about it with him. Except the lawyer tells her, hey, he left you, besides some money, the keys to Baneberry Hall. And she didn't even know that her dad still owned that place. The place he just like yanked his family out of in sheer terror at what was happening in that house. And this is her moment. She's like, I am gonna go reclaim my past, my childhood, look for some answers, just like further driving the point that that whole book was a lie. And she's also like a house flipper. She's gonna renovate it and sell it for a profit. But then when she arrives, maybe that book was a little bit more truthful than she thought it was, or would have liked to admit. Usually I don't like thrillers that revolve around a haunted house feel, because they're really trying to drive home that, oh, the ghost did it narrative, and not leaving behind clues as to how the actual human behind the curtains is doing it. But this one handled it perfectly. I had so many theories that were like well-founded, and some of them were right, some of them were wrong. There were so many red herrings that I fell for, and it got good reactions out of me. There was one scene with snakes and coffee, freaked me out. If you freaked out at the rat scene from Southern's Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, you won't like this one either, my friend. But the plot and what is happening in this house really had me snagged. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. Ending was fantastic. It gave me not one, not two, not three, but 4 plot twists, and I ate up every single one of them. Yum, 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 yum. So I can't recommend this enough. It was super good. A banging good way to end off the month. However, I read some other books this month and I didn't like them nearly as much. No, I hated a great deal of them. Actually, have you guys seen that video I did where I did a first line buy challenge? I went to a bookstore and I bought books based on just like the first line of the book, if it impressed me or not. Well, this month I read 3 books from that challenge. Shallow Graves, The Lantern's Ember, and lastly, The Glittering Court. All of them were bad. All of them were on clearance. I think I know why now. Anyways, let's start with the first one I read this month, Shallow Grave. So, it started off very well. First 50 pages I was into. We have this girl, or better yet, we have this corpse who was a girl. Her name is Breezy. I kept forgetting her name because it's in first person and barely anyone called her by her name. Anyway, she had been dead for a while, probably about a year, and then suddenly one day she just woke up in the dirt, choking on dirt. Some man was like helping to pull her out, and like he's like, oh, perfect, like you're great, like finally at long last. And that's all we ever like heard from him, because like the second like she touched him trying to get him to pull her out of her own grave, like she has this, our girl Breezy has this ability to know who's a killer, and when they got that killer black energy around them, she can just rip it off them and kill them too. And that man was a killer, so the second she touched him, she like absorbed all his memories through that black cloud and killed him. So she got like some select memories, but she doesn't really understand like how she's back kinda alive. Like she can force herself to breathe, but she doesn't need to breathe. She can't control her digestive system, so she can't eat and doesn't need to eat. She can get wounded, but it heals really quick. But she has no idea why she's here. She tries to go back to her family and be like, hey, I'm alive, kinda. But that fails after some incidents. So she's just hitchhiking around America at the moment. And whenever she sees someone with that black energy around them, signifying that they're a killer, she rips it off if she feels like they deserve it. If they deserve death. And sometimes it's hard to tell who deserves death. And so she's just playing her hitchhiking hop around cities game until she gets this pamphlet for a church just offering, you know, room and board for anyone who needs it. And when she gets there, it's really creepy, and some things go wrong. My least favorite thing about this whole thing was exposition through the dialogue. Basically, it was all exposition, not any bonding. You get me? When someone was talking, it was for exposition. Like, as soon as we see the villain, he's already, like, expositionizing himself. Like, there's no subtlety. The moment you lay eyes on him, you're like, yeah, hello, villain. Nice to see you. The book also made like this was a thriller. This would have been like a bad way to put in a plot twist. Like it was revealed one character had children and the mom didn't say anything. It was Breezy who was like, you have children. And it really came out of nowhere. Like, how did you know she had children? It is a big plot point, but how'd she know? Everything was a rush when it did not need to be. And I honestly can't even remember, besides just like surviving, going from city to city, what the purpose of this book was about. Because let's see how I can explain this. This is a standalone, and let's just say if Harry Potter was written, the first Harry Potter book was written like this, it would have been like trying to cram in all the world building in Harry Potter into one book. That's why there's so much exposition in this book, because it's trying to say too much instead of focusing on what the first book needs to accomplish. Rather than this feeling like an adventure, it felt like someone's backstory. It felt like what we would hear about some character in another book, like, oh yeah, he went on this journey across America to slay this great monster called Mother. I remember we were after a monster named Mother. And as far as the world building went, even though it said so much, it was done so poorly. And this book is all about the different type of monsters, like Breezy's a reanimated corpse. There's sirens, there's ghouls. But when like talking about other monsters, like, oh, what about werewolves? They're like, oh, we don't know. We don't know if they're real. So many of the questions asked were answered with, we don't know. It's a mystery. We don't know. I mean, you're already telling me so much about the world. world, but the real cool questions you're not answering. No one gives you a straightforward answer. And everything is either answered with a question or just met with stony silence as we look mysteriously onto the horizon. It took itself way too seriously, and I'm pretty sure it has some cringy dialogue too. I either gave this book a 1 or I DNF'd it because I can't remember the ending for the life of me. Okay, next up we have The Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. Did this lady write Vampire Diaries? Yep, she did. They're all up there on the back. This review is gonna be super short because I DNF'd this at page 17. Okay, so what happened in this 17 pages to make me just go, no? Nothing the first 10 pages. Glittering Court, what's it about? So we get this girl. This girl whose name I don't really care to remember. Let's call her Abby. Abby lives in this land. It's like a proper Victorian England kind of land. These ladies who are in these high stations have to marry into these rich families to, you know, keep the family name and honor. Abby's family has fallen into destitution. They had to sell their second house in Rome or something like that. So all of their money that they still have is just going to making Abby look good so she can get that husband. This book is called The Glittering Court because out there in the far distant land is the Glittering Court, which is like half business venture school, half regular school. We're teaching these ladies how to be, you know, hoity-toity, proper young Victorian ladies. But also, you know, we gotta learn about the monies too. I hope that's a good description. I only read 17 pages. So Abby, instead of like, you know, wanting this Victorian life, she decides to run off to the Glittering Court under a pseudonym, a disguised name, an alias. But before all that, we got introduced to her suitor, her cousin.
Looks like I got another addition to my incest shelf. No one should have an incest shelf.
But anyways, Abby's grandma set this whole suitorship up. Like, oh, come on, he has money. And Abby's like, he's my cousin. He just keeps itching. Like, why is he itching constantly? Why is he so obsessed with Barley? The conversation between her and Barley cousin, itchy Barley cousin, was so awkward that I was actually loving it. But I was still like, you know, watching them. But then we get past that awkward, oh, we're gonna get married stage. And then we finally, what's this girl's name? Adelaide. I was almost right. Anyways, Adelaide finally actually hears about the Glittering Court, and the Glittering Court is in a land called Andoria. After hearing this conversation between a maid and the guy who's gonna bring the maid to Andoria, Adelaide is like, let me quote, "Andoria, that's what this was about?" I nearly leaned forward and then remembered myself. Still, it was hard not to be taken in. Andoria, the country discovered across the sunset sea. Andoria, the very sound of it inspired adventure and excitement. And right there is where I DNF'd. This may be petty, but my DNF sense is never wrong. And right there when she said, Andoria, the very sound of it inspired adventure and excitement, that right there hit me with cringe. Because that's just a bad way to say it. The very sound of it inspired adventure and excitement. It's just a name. And we're 17 pages in. We should be told it inspires adventure and excitement. We should hear tales that inspire adventure and excitement into us. And the real reason why I DNF'd this is because that line, Andoria, an inspired adventure and excitement, is eerily similar to a line I wrote in some defunct book series I had when I was like 13. And I'm pretty sure I wrote the exact same line about some city somewhere in that fantasy world. That's a mistake, 13-year-old Casey. And if this author is writing like 13-year-old Casey, no one should read it. And I have another DNF. I was actually really liking this one at first. The first 100 pages, I thought it was so cute. The Lantern's Ember. When I first picked it up, I thought it was like a spoof of The Serpent and Dove. That's what it sounded like on the back. So this book is about Ember. Ember's a witch in the 1800s. I want you to remember that. 1800s, America. Yeah, Ember is a witch, and she loves it. Her friend knows she's a witch. Her grandma knows she's a witch. You know, there's not really a big stigma against witches in 1800s, or at least where she lives. Everybody seems to be cool with it. She's a good witch. She uses her powers for good, and she can't help but notice that there's some mysterious entity keeping watch over her. His name is Jack. He's a lantern. Lanterns guard the crossroads between this world and the monster world, I guess. They make sure no one goes over the bridge between those worlds. Not a human into the monster world, and vice versa. And he is supposed to report whenever a witch is born, because witches are the power source of the monster world. But instead of reporting that Ember's a witch, he just watches over her. And as she grows up, he begins to fall in love with her. and she notices that he's watching her, and you know, they're like kind of flirting at a distance. Like she'll fall asleep conveniently in a meadow, and she'll wake up and his jacket will be over her like a blanket, stuff like that. She'll just happen to leave like a plate of SpaghettiOs. That's not an 18th century food. She'll leave a plate of venison on a stump for him. Sweet. They were cute. They were kind of cute, yeah. And one day they just like, you know, they finally start chatting. The chemistry is popping. And one day she's like, I have this burning urge to go to the monster world. And he's like, no, they will kill you. So they had this cute little contest that lasted like 5 pages of her like trying to sneak past him on the bridge to get to the monster world. And he just kept like going, no. He's like turned her around like, no, I ain't falling for your tricks. Get out of here. But one day she's like huffing and puffing and this vampire shows up. Now we're in a love triangle. And he's like, hello, witch. The High Witch of the monster world has decreed that she would like to meet you. I am to guide you to the monster world. Take my elbow, for I am a gentlemanly chap. Vampire bite. Ow. He's very sexy. And she's like, yes, goodly sir, I will go with you. And so she and Vampire Man is spirited away to monster world. And Jack is like, where the heck did my lady love go? So then he recruits the help of Ember's friend, a mortal friend. I can't remember his name, let's call him Henry. Henry is also in love with Ember, so now we got like a love rectangle, and I love it. But then it's also hinted that the High Witch's husband has something for Ember, so now it's love pentagon. I will never say no to a love pentagon. So I was into this book because I am a sucker for the love triangle, rectangle, pentagon. Wow. It just sounds all majestic. The reason why I DNF this book is Ember has no personality. Sorry, she really doesn't. She had some in the beginning, but then it just all sort of like went away. I liked all the guys. The guys were cool. Vampire one, I especially approve of. But I have a feeling they're not going to end up together because she met Jack first. The reason why I DNF this was tone shift. So it starts out in the 1800s. So we have that really Victorian vibe, but also in the country, so it's crisp and autumny. It was a good setting. But then we leave the mortal world to go into the monster world, and it's suddenly very steampunk-esque. And I didn't have a problem with that at first, but because, like, it's ran on witches' power, so yeah, there's going to be, like, technological advances over the human world. But it just got, like, more and more and more steampunk, and so it just completely ripped me out of that Victorian countryside feeling. And then it took a step beyond that and went into one of those old Universal movies where it's like Frankenstein meets the vampire meets the werewolf versus the mummy. It literally became that because now it's become a spoof of monster movies. There was the werewolf, a vampire. There was Frankenstein. There was even like an Igor, Dr. Frankenstein. There are so many monsters there that were obviously stereotype monsters. And even literally the bride of Frankenstein was there. You know, the black hive hairdo with the white lightning mark on it. She popped up and that's when I DNF'd. And I was like, I really don't know what this book's trying to do anymore. We went from cute love octagon to steampunk to monster mash. And it was just really jarring. There was that slip, that degrading of the characters, and I just wasn't really loving it. So I bounced. I did the mash. I did the monster mash. So I have 2 books left. They are Wicked King by Holly Black and Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Both I gave a 3. So Cruel Prince, the first book in the series, I gave a 3 too. I'm very, very meh about this whole series. First book starts out with Jude. She was a human girl living in the human world. She has a twin sister, Tayern, and they have an older sister named Vivi. Vivi is obviously an elf. She has the pointed ears. She has like hair growing on the tips of them. She doesn't look human. She has cat eyes too. Turns out their mom was like one of those humans who gets taken by fairies to live in the fairy world with them. She was the wife of a mad redcap named Madoc, who's actually like my favorite character throughout this whole thing. And then one day when she was pregnant with Vivi, his baby, she ran back to the human world. She met a new guy and she and him had the twins. So the twins grow up a bit and Madoc, after looking for her for so long, finds his wife. He bursts through the door and he's like, lady, why are you stealing my baby? Why are you running away? She's like, I cannot be with you. He's like, then I shall kill you. So he like stabs her, then he stabs the husband, then he looks at these 3 kids, he's like, I shall raise thee as my own. So that's what happens. Jude, regardless of witnessing her parents' murder, loves it in the fairy world. She loves her foster father, Maddox, and she wants to be like just like him. She wants to be a knight, but she's human, and the fairy courts aren't that nice to humans, so it's going to be very, very hard for her to ascend the ranks, especially because there's Prince Carden loafing around. I love Carden. Judge me if I want. He hates Jude because she beats him at everything, and I love those moments of rivalry between Carden and Jude, both trying to one-up each other. The first book is actually my favorite in this series. It had a predictable plot, but it was still enjoyable. The second book, Wicked King, picked up off of that really good ending in Cruel Prince, where some trickery happened, and it starts off good. Like, we're tense because we have like 4 different people immediately who hate us, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, where's the drama? Okay, who's gonna try to kill Jude first? And then we got Carden being all sulky, like, I'm not happy with this right now. We have like armies and other parts of the fairy courts about to betray us and stuff like that. The sea itself is threatening to revolt against the current ruler of the fairy world. Back to Cruel Prince, I loved like the havoc that was happening with the king and his sons and daughters. That was very entertaining. So now we're in the aftermath of when that event got settled and who ended up on the throne. But I'm talking that the chapters of Wicked King started off well. The prologue was very on the nose. It starts off with a memory of Maddox having a sparring lesson with the twins, and he's just like repeatedly saying, oh, it's easy to gain power, but it's harder to keep it. What do you think the theme of this book is about? Subtlety is essential. This book is not good at subtlety. There's literally a part where June is sparring with her reflection, and she's like, oh, I can never win. I can never win. You're fighting a mirror. What? You think I'm gonna applaud you for hinting that the greatest enemy is always yourself? There's also a lot of story revolving around some side characters called the Ghost, the Bomb, and the Roach. They're not really there a lot, so I don't care about them. Another character betrays someone, and they're never there, basically, so I don't care about his or her betrayal. It focuses so much on Jude and Carden, and it doesn't put any focus on like the external aspects of like the war going on. I mean, Jude is a spy, and she's a not really a good spy, so we're kept in the dark a lot. And Queen of Nothing, the third book, is actually my least favorite, mostly because there's one little plot hole. The letters. You've read the book. What happened to the letters? It's never mentioned why Jude, whatever her face is, did not get the letters. Just my little personal nitpick. Queen of Nothing chiefly revolves around a prophecy that's barely mentioned in the second book. Carden isn't as much as a jerk as he is in the other books. It wasn't as fun as the others. My main thing about this series is I love moments in it rather than the whole thing. And those moments all revolve around Carden. I earnestly think this whole series would have been way better if Jude was not the main character. Personality-wise, she isn't much. She just gets the job done. But Carden has the personality, has the backstory, and is just a fun character, and the prophecy revolves around him. So I think this series, in his point of view right from the get-go, would have been fantastic. We have that dark prophecy over his birth. We have his horrible, abusive childhood. We have that weird relationship with his only brother that loved him but was also awful to him, Balekin. And if we could have seen everything that caused him to become a monster, and that, just the confliction he feels about his feelings for Jude. And he was always told, oh, you're going to be awful. You're going to be awful. Prophecy says you're going to be a monster. So he's like, okay, then I'll be the best monster. But then, like, he has those moments of niceness. So I think if we were, like, firsthand in his head while he was, like, battling with himself over, I like this girl. I want to, like, give her a dress. But also, like, I want to destroy her limb from limb. That would have been so cool to be with. So I think the main story of this series was it was told from the wrong character's point of view. I love the setting though. I love fae books because of the atmosphere and the detail and the world. Magic is just so fun to write. But there's nothing really that would keep me wanting to keep the books on my shelves. I don't think I'll ever reread it, except to read some of Carden's parts from book 1 probably. So this is what I got for this month. Read this. It was the only good one. Avoid all these. I mean, I do recommend Carden, but that's it. Also, just love this. There are so many Fairy Courts and Queen of Nothing, Wicked King, Cruel Prince. It's so hard to tell who's who. Way too many characters. The Cruel Prince series is set in the same world as Holly Black's other series, you know, Tithe, Modern Day Fairy Tale, whatever it's called. And so those characters in those books are in these books too. And besides them like being nobility, they don't really serve a purpose. They're barely there, but when they are there, it's apparently a big deal. But if you haven't read those other books, you don't really get what the big deal is about these characters. So guys, that is it. Nano has come to an end. January is coming towards us at lightning speed. 2021 is on the way, and hopefully some good books come my way. You guys voted on me reading The Lies of Locke Lamora, and I'm excited for that. I've heard great things about that series. And so stay reading, my friends.